Have you ever wondered why one game you're dominating and popping off in Overwatch while the immediate next you can't seem to get any kills or win a team fight at all? This is probably because you're playing some of the worst hero combos in all of Overwatch. And if you don't know how to spot these out and avoid them, you are setting yourself up for failure right off the bat. So we're gonna break all that down, but it says only 20% of you subscribed, so I'm gonna make you a deal. You let me know down below what video you want to see. Press that subscribe button and I'll get to writing right away. And let's jump right into the video. Now, first, let's talk about anti-synergy. I think this is one of the biggest ones that creates terrible combos in Overwatch, and it's where one character on the team wants to accomplish completely different things as someone else. And this is super bad to do, especially if you're in a duo. And let's talk about tanks and compositions, because there's three core compositions in Overwatch. There's Poke, there's Brawl, and there's Dive. Poke wants to deal damage from far away and whittle down enemy resources. Brawl wants to typically take the fight to the enemy team and trade resources in a head-to-head confrontation right next to each other, or try to steamroll over and through the enemy team. And then last up is Dive, which is going to surgically jump onto isolated targets, trying to pick apart the enemy team, typically with characters of high mobility. So typically when the tank is picked, that dictates the types of compositions you can play. While a tank can often play in multiple different types of compositions, as for example, Amalga could play in both Brawl and Poke, and Junker Queen can play in both Brawl and Dive, you're not gonna have a Doomfist capable of poking, or a Winston capable of brawling. So basically, as long as there is some overlap between what the tank can play and what your character you pick can do, then you're fine. But as an example, if you play a character like Reaper, who could probably play in both a Brawl and a Dive composition, right? It has overlap in those two categories, but you're playing him with a Sigma, which is a Poke tank, and only capable of playing Poke as Sigma. That's the only composition that is possible to play out of the three. Then there's no overlap there. So everything the Sigma's doing, the Reaper's not a part of, and everything the Reaper's doing, the Sigma's not a part of. And it creates that anti-synergy that sets you up for failure before you even have started playing the game. Now, it's important to understand that there are some characters that are surprising in the way they can be used in different compositions. Like Widowmaker, for example. You would think, oh, Widow is Poke and only Poke, but actually no. That character is useful in multiple types of compositions, including Brawl to a lesser extent and Dive to a larger extent, because this character can use the Brawl or the Dive and the aggro that they're generating to create angles and looks from different places on the map and still actually apply damage to the fight that their team is setting, right? So there'll be some DPS that are actually far more flexible than others and capable of playing with many different types of tanks and their compositions respectively. Now, this doesn't just actually stop at DPS. Of course, it supports as well, and having supports that want to do the same things as their tanks and with the composition also is incredibly important, right? Having a character like Zen, for instance, can be extremely strong in a Poke and a Dive, but in a Brawl, he cannot go in with the Brawl, nor can he be that close-range damage dealer or enable the rest of his team to enact the Brawl, so he really wouldn't fit, and that would create an anti-synergy. And keep in mind, I'm not saying you cannot play these characters, because you absolutely can still win and still succeed with an anti-synergy on your team, but oftentimes you feel like you're being really inconsistent, right? You have some games where you pop off and some games where you lose, but it really comes down to the fact that you're not playing towards these synergies. You are just picking the character you want to pick and not considering how you need to either change up your play or even change up your pick to better fit what's going on with what your team wants to do and the composition that they are playing. Now, on the flip side, if you can look at these synergies and if you can identify them and try to enable the comp the best possible, right? So as a really simple example, if you have a Winston on your team, yes, you can play a lot of different types of characters that can still work with the Winston Dive in the space that is created. A lot of hit scans would work, a lot of characters that could even spam could be okay, but a Dive character can utilize the baiting of cooldowns that the Winston is creating, the space that he's creating when he bubbles in. It's incredibly synergistic, so you could actually be a worse of a player or play worse, but because you have the synergies, you could dominate a better player that is off their synergy or just playing a base level game. And this goes triple if the tank on your team has showcased that they are capable of getting value. You really want to double down on that synergy. I think like a whole bunch of seasons ago, I would constantly queue in the middle of the night and run into Guru, who's like one of the best Junker Queens in the world. And I'll just lock Reaper and just run it down with him because the synergy stacked. I knew he was insanely good. So I just got to get free wins and get free value because I synergized my pick to his pick, synergized my play to his play, right? It was just that simple. And I think a lot of people are trying to make it way too complicated where they are trying to play an anti-synergy and just brute force their way to every single victory. Yes, you're gonna have to do that to climb in Overwatch every once in a while. Don't make yourself do it more than you have to. Make it easier on yourself. Now, the next type of terrible combo that we got to talk about is lacking resources. And the thing you think of first off is like low heals. This is what everyone says. And it can legitimately be true. There are some support combos that don't output the resources that is needed for the team to sustain or keep alive, right? If we talk about Brig Zen, this is a very low heal overall composition. And because of that, there are some characters that literally cannot survive on this low of healing resources. Characters like Rein, characters like Zarya, characters like Winston. There isn't enough burst healing and there isn't enough mass healing to get these characters up to full so that they can actually cycle appropriately, right? But if you're playing a character like Ball or even potentially a character like Doom, you could actually make this work and it could be an okay composition. So it's important to understand the needs of your team versus what you can provide them as a duo. Now, sometimes you can do the job or have enough heals, but it forces your support duo to actually play in a way that isn't the most optimal strategy. So as an example, Lucio Mercy, right? We talk about this combo a lot because yes, you could probably keep up a front line and keep up a team if the Mercy heal bots the whole time, but if there is an Echo, a Pharah, a hit scan, someone to pocket, you would much rather have that Mercy on the pocket because pocketing a DPS and getting that damage boost value is going to be way more value in general than just being a heal botter, which is something a lot of other characters can do and then more. So it's important to not only think about what your duo can provide, but also if you have to meet those demands, is there anything else that you're kind of letting go of or leaving behind or doing unoptimally because of that? Now, something else that people will always call is we have low damage, and this could mean a lot of different things. Most of the time, though, this is a synergy problem or a focus fire problem. Like, doing trash damage, just general damage out, oftentimes will not result in a kill because it will be able to get just healed up unless there's some sort of follow-up, follow-through, focus on the side of your team. So it could be a communication problem, and if there is like a literal lack of damage, that doesn't mean really anything because certain compositions don't need or require damage at all in order to thrive. A Widowmaker is going to be able to get value with very little overall damage. A character like Mei is going to be able to get a lot of value with very little overall damage. That doesn't mean that these characters are playing good or bad, but to say low damage as a stat is oftentimes incorrect unless you're attributing it to a character that is supposed to have potentially high damage and it's been a long enough time. But there are always certain examples where this isn't entirely relevant. So like as an example, maybe your Junkrat has been flanking and killing people left, right, and center with his flank combo, and he's carrying the game, but he has low damage because he's not spamming. It doesn't freaking matter if you get the win. So make sure that you're not calling something like this when it doesn't really have anything to do with the reason your team is not able to win team fights. Now, a resource that a lot of people don't even consider, but it's actually a really important one, is low peel resources, or the low ability to actually peel. And all peeling is going and helping out a teammate, right? It's your teammates under stress, you're going and helping them out. And there are certain characters that don't have the means to run away or defend themselves very easily, so they need someone to actively protect them and keep them in the back of their mind. So a character like Zen, a character like Ana, right? An Ana and Brig combo works so well because the Brig can constantly peel for the Ana and keep her alive and keep people off her. But if you have a DPS Kiriko, a Tracer, a Genji, a Doomfist all jumping the back line, that Ana is a sitting duck, and if the enemy team have anyone to pressure her, that Ana either has to be an absolute god and hit a sleep dart and freaking pop off, or that Ana's just gonna die over and over and over again. So you gotta kind of think about it this way. You either need to swap out the Ana and play a character that doesn't require peel, or you need to swap up the comp and provide peel to the Ana, or have a character that has the ability to peel easily. Now, there also is a third option here, which is recognizing that your team doesn't have the capability to peel and altering your play by changing up your play style. So a great example of this is a Doom that plays anti-dive, or a Genji that will mark an enemy Tracer or an enemy Genji, or a Tracer that will mark an enemy DPS. And marking is just following them around and forcing them to play passive by mixing up their cooldown. So let's say the enemy team is trying to set up a dive where they're going to dive with 3 people, right? But you as a Genji dash through the enemy Tracer. So you dash through the enemy Tracer, they have to recall. Now the enemy can jump in with 2 people, or the enemy Tracer can go in without their recall and then potentially die. So you're creating an anti-synergy there in timing, and it's a way to actually compensate for a lack of resources or a gap in resources and peel capability in your team composition. So it's like you identify the weakness. So what am I going to do about that weakness? How am I going to help my teammates through that weakness? And that could be the thing that levels up your gameplay to the next level and the next level, if you can still alter your gameplay depending on your synergy or resources. And another example of this is, let's say one of your supports dies and your whole team is critical. This means play safe. Don't poke. Don't force your support to do more things than they have to do. They're already being overstimulated with how many things they have to do, and as a team, you're lacking heals as a resource, so don't do anything that is going to cause your team to demand more resources, right? Play passive, play slow. And if there's a composition that doesn't have a lot of burst healing, doesn't have a lot of these resources, don't play in a way that forces your team to constantly pump resources into you. This is really, really important because I think this will level up your play to the next level. If you really want to become great at Overwatch, this is the thing you need to master more than anything else. Now, the third thing that I wanted to mention is that sometimes heroes don't have any synergy with each other, but they can actually help each other out in a way that works in ranked at the very least. So in a pro setting, you would like everyone to be on the same page, but in ranked, oftentimes you just want to not be shut down with what you're trying to do, and if you could do that thing well enough, you're fine. So let's say a Widow and a Junkrat, as a hypothetical. They don't really synergize in any meaningful way, but if the enemy Pharah, which is uncounterable by you as a Junkrat, gets constantly sniped by your Widowmaker, and you're just kind of free to do what you want, then it actually just works. I mean, this requires them to be able to do their job so that you could do yours, so it is kind of like a glass house, or, you know, if one thing falls, everything crumbles, right? If they get farmed and killed, then you'll get farmed and killed. So it's a risky composition, not built with strong synergy or a strong foundation, but it could still potentially work in a ranked environment. So I would say, while there are lots of rules that you should know, it doesn't mean that you have to strongly adhere to them at all points in time, and especially in ranked play, but understand what they mean for how you should play, understand where the gaps are, what's lacking, and that's the way that you can really adapt your play, adapt your pick, and just start to win way more and be way more consistent of a player. But really, this is a complex topic, so if you have any questions, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments down below. And subscribe and let me know what video you want to see next, and I'll be right on it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.